Hey guys, Berger here with MVP Paintball. Thanks a lot for joining us on this episode of Tech Tuesday. This week, we're going to go over one of our customer repair guns who brought it in for warranty work. So what a lot of people don't realize is that any of the guns that we sell, we actually offer a lifetime warranty on it. If you're too lazy and you don't want to oil it up, or you just don't really know how to and you don't feel comfortable opening it up yourself, bring it into us. We'll do all of that maintenance on there for you. This is one of our warranty repair guns. Customer stated that it wasn't shooting well, so I'm going to rip into it and see what's going on with it. I've already degassed this off camera. I made sure that there was no air in the regulator. Just for safety purposes, it's always a good idea to do that. Even though there's not a tank on here, sometimes when you take that tank off, it'll hold a charge in here and it'll still be live. So we're going to take this off because we don't need the barrel and the barrel bag on here for what we're going to do. And one thing I do recommend is anytime that you're going to ever dry fire one of the dye guns that has eye pipes in it, either have the barrel on, or at least the back of it on, or remove your eye pipe. A lot of times what will happen is you'll go to dry fire, your eye pipe goes flying out the front. So we're going to pull the eye pipe out, which does have some damage. So I've got a replacement for that. We'll swap that out for them. Looking down into the breech, I don't know if the camera can pick it up or not, but tip of the bolt is a little bit far forward. Sometimes what will happen is, and you'll see it when I open this up, the body of the engine in here, it does separate into a couple of different pieces, so sometimes that'll just back off a little bit and it'll actually lengthen it. So we're going to take this out, take off the back cap. That's another reason you want to make sure that there's no air left in here, because if this is holding a charge in here when you do this, it could damage the O-rings and create an unsafe condition. All right, so that popped off. That's pretty normal. All right, this looks pretty dry. Not really much in the way of lube on here, and that can just happen over time as well. I'm going to pull that off. Yeah, it doesn't look like that's been lubed lately. So I'm going to remove this front O-ring. This really is for cleaning off the eye pipe as the bolt moves back and forth. Yeah, this thing's bone dry. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rag off camera. Sorry about that. And let's just wipe it down, make sure that there's no paint residue on there, no old lube. We're going to get this back up and running with some dye slick lube. You want to just take a look inside of here. This is actually a Rize Maxxed. This is last year's model. They have the CZR, I think it's called now, which basically combine the Rize and the Rize Maxxed, which there are some differences between. I'm just going to clean this off. I'm going to inspect the breech, see how that looks down there. It's pretty clean. No paint residue in there. All right, so we're going to take our dye slick lube. Just put a little bit on that O-ring right there. Just bring it across. And as I'm doing this, I'm also inspecting the O-rings. If any of them need replacing, I will replace those. Some glue on my fingers. Again, just put some lube on that back piece. That's really all the lube that you need on there. I'm going to put the front piece on, inspect the O-ring that's in there. That does look pretty good. Just a little dab of lube. So this customer in particular does not feel comfortable opening up their marker, so anytime that there's an issue with it, they just bring it in, and we're happy to take care of it for them. So when you do this, you really just want to kind of guide it back and forth. Make sure that it feels like there's nothing hung up on there. Occasionally some of the O-rings will swell and it creates some resistance in there. And the reason I do this before putting it all back together is because I can kind of isolate what O-ring it is that's possibly hanging up in here. If I put it all together and I start moving it back and forth, then I don't really know which O-ring it is. But by doing it this way, I can eliminate the front O-ring, the sail O-ring, and then once I put the back cap back on there, these back O-rings, if they're binding up, or if it's binding up, then I know that it's got to be those ones. So I'm just going to put that on, maybe. Super helpful if you put it together properly. Shh. Nobody saw that. There we go. See, I was just testing you guys to see if you noticed that I was putting it together wrong. So now when I'm doing this, it still feels pretty good. No binding. Everything feels pretty well lubed. So we're just going to lube these outside O-rings. And again, just a little bit of lube. Doesn't take a whole lot. So when you're lubing these, a good rule of thumb is you can kind of see that there's some space in between the metal and the O-ring. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of sealing that space up. Try to get rid of the black around it. You can see that there's white filling that. And I'm not, just globbing it on there. So wrap that around. Same thing with the front two O-rings. A lot of times you can hit those front O-rings with at one time just by going around it. And we got to get this back O-ring. When you put this in too, you want to make sure that you don't just jam it in as hard as you can. There are threads on the inside of here that it can catch on and it can rip your O-ring, and then you're going to end up having leaks. So just kind of go gentle with it. Nope, forgot to put the front O-ring back on. This one we don't need to lube. This is just for cleaning the eye pipe off. I'll show you what that is. Here's the new eye pipe. So when this is sitting in the breech like that and goes back and forth, it's going to clean off any broken paint that ends up in the eye pipe if you do break paint, and it just cleans it out for it so that your eyes continue to work after you have a broken ball in there. So we want to make sure that these are all snug. You don't need to really wrench them together like that. You just want to make sure that they don't back out on their own. And orientation wise, it doesn't really matter which way you put it in here because you are screwing the whole thing in. Just push it in gently. Take your Allen wrench. And it's just hand snug, so I didn't put a lot of force into there. Looking down, it looks like the bolt is sitting back further. Looks about normal now. So I'm going to slide the eye pipe in. Now if you're like me and you got big fingers, when you slide this in, your finger gets stuck in there. And then you can't get the finger out without pulling the eye pipe back out. So what I like to do is set it in there, use another finger, and you're taking your finger and putting it here, and you're kind of pulling it back so it does go all the way back. All right, so that is seated all the way back. Let's see if we can get that in focus. Right inside of here. And what we're going to do is we are going to put the barrel back on. I do have an air tank off camera that I am going to grab. Try to keep this off camera just because I have a tendency to move stuff around and then it rolls off the table. So gas it up. Listen for any leaks. Word of advice too, if you're trying to find a leak next to the macro line, don't stick it right up next to your ear. If these fittings ever do pop, it's a lot of pressure coming out of there, so you want to make sure that your ear's not directly up against there. Kind of cover it up a little bit. Listen down the breech, nothing there. So we're going to turn it on. Bypass the vision. There we go. Sounds good. And off camera, I will chrono this for them. Our field speed here is 250 feet per second. So, I'll get this chronoed up for them and they should be good to go. And this is what I'm referring to. The air is off. It still had a charge in there, so we want to make sure that we always discharge that before disassembling any of the work on there. A lot of times too, when a customer comes in for warranty work, we'll go through other things on here. Open up the board, look in there, see if there's any corrosion, any paint. I'll do all that stuff off of camera for here. And if they've been complaining about inconsistent shots or something like that, we take the reg apart, reset that for them, make sure that all of the screws are nice and snug. Usually I use my other tool set for this. Actually, while we have it open, we'll just take a quick look at that board. These are a little tight in there. Now what a lot of people will notice is the spot that I'm taking off is not the side with the battery in it. Battery is on the other side of the board, but I like to take a look at the back side of the board, see if there's any paint, any kind of residue on there. There is a little bit of paint residue on here. What I'll probably do is just grab Q-tip, throw some alcohol on there without the battery in it. Make sure I turn it on without the battery, just in case there's any capacitors or anything that are holding a charge. I'll clean all that off for them. Make sure that the battery terminals are nice, which they look fine on here. Flip it over, take a look at the other side. And you might be wondering how you get paint on the inside of there. If you get shot in your grip frame, sometimes that paint will go up through your trigger mechanism, sprays inside of there. Sometimes if you just don't have these tightened up enough, it can kind of seep in there as well. This gun's pretty new. It hasn't really been taken apart much. That's why these screws are a little bit tougher to get out right now. So we're going to look on this side, pull the battery. Another thing worth noting is don't go to the dollar store and get cheap dollar batteries. A lot of times they don't last very long in here. In my experience, I've noticed that they corrode pretty quickly. So always try and use a high quality battery in there. This little red tab is so that when you put the battery in, instead of trying to use a tool or your nail or something to pull the battery out, you can just pull this up. This little rubber piece right here, this is just for resistance on the battery terminals, which look pretty good. This little red ribbon is not all the way on, so we're just gonna put that in there through, maybe. There we go. There's a little tab in here that just kind of holds that in place. You notice that there's a plus and a minus on here. There's a plus and a minus on the battery. So you want to make sure that you line those up, push it back in. There's that. Taking a look at these connectors, just kind of give them a push down. Just make sure that they're seated properly. Those look fine. Overall, this gun is in really, really good condition. So we're just going to screw these back together. Maybe. Sometimes lining up these holes are the hardest part of working on these markers. Then what I'll also do is I'll end up, taking a look at his barrel, seeing if the front ports are clogged up with paint. We'll get them cleaned out for him, clean out the barrel, make sure everything's just good to go for him. Just a few more screws to go and we will be set. Something I'd like to show you on that eye pipe as well. So the eye pipes for these are two parts, and there are ball detents, and then there's the plastic eye pipe. And you really need to make sure that you're paying attention to which gun you have. because there are different generations of eye pipes and they are not all backwards compatible. So like these are the newer ones and they're blue instead of clear, so you know that they go in the newer guns. They made them a little bit thicker. So you can see that it cracked here. Let's see, try and get that in focus. I don't know if it's going to focus for you, but there's a little piece missing here. It's not missing on this side, a little crack here. If your eye pipe itself is broken, you just replace this part. And this right here is the ball detents. I just threw a whole new unit in there for them. These look pretty good still, so I'm not going to toss them. This piece is garbage, so I'll throw that away. So there you have it. That is the Proto Rize Maxxed, and good to go for our customer. Hope you guys learned something. Thanks a lot for joining us.